Hi everybody, thanks so much for coming to the reading of The End of the World Place by Miyoko. And my name is Abigail De Kosnik. I'm an assistant professor in TDPS, this department, and also the Berkeley Center for New Media. It's been my privilege to work with Miyoko in a number of capacities. I'm one of her advisors, and actually when I was desperately trying to recruit her to come to Berkeley, she was writing this play. And in my, hard sell, while I was asking her what she was working on so that I could better convince her that we were the best school for her, she said, I am working on something and it's just a work in progress and I'm not really sure where it's going. And it's so wonderful. Today she told me this was that play that she was working on at that time. So it was so wonderful to finally read it and see it. And I love this play. I'm a huge fan of this whole world that you've created, which is first of all an amazing meditation on death from so many perspectives, all the way from deaths that have already happened, like the father passing, deaths that are sort of imminent and known, like Carlos's, and deaths that are on a global scale and on this kind of a scale beyond imagining the death of the world. So it's kind of the most beautiful play I've read about death, actually. Thank you. It's so lyrical and humorous, and also in this register of magical realism. So it's a really tremendous and deep and powerful piece. I want to hear questions from the audience, by the way, so be thinking about, stuff you're going to ask, but I'll ask a couple to kick us off. I wanted to ask, it is the end of the world geographically, spatially. Is the world flat in this play? What does it mean that it is literally the end of the world spatially?
I did not want to make it that the world was flat per se, but I did not go into the geography of it at all, but I did want there to be a sense that that there was a point where the world would just stop to be, but I don't know if that means like it's flat or if we can still have our world and just have this nothingness spot. So.
Okay, a vague answer, the artist's prerogative. No, that's legit. I'll take that. I wanted to. I've took so many notes. There's so many things I want to ask you about, which I'm sure I will not get to ask all of these things. So I just want to say, I just want to catch up onto one theme, which is beginner's mind. In Zen Buddhism, there is this concept of beginner's mind, which is that, the expert has nothing to learn. The beginner is always learning, is always ready to learn. So even the most highly trained, most educated, most sophisticated person should always cultivate beginner's mind. And I think that comes through in so many characters of this play. In Pema, who is always trying to cultivate that, and even though she isn't a Buddhist, she is Tibetan and she acknowledges she was raised in Buddhism. And the stranger, of course, has to have beginner's mind because he has no knowledge of his own past. And Carlos is a child, so he has beginner's mind because all children do. And I also think Ray has that open attitude towards just everything being new and beginning again, although she simultaneously is trapped in her own expectation that people come and go, they come and go, and she's the only one that stays behind. So she doesn't have that mindset. So I just wanted to ask if you had any thoughts about that theme of starting, or the romance starts maybe in a couple of places. Do you guys think that Pema and Demi had something going on? Romance starts at the end, too. So anyway, I just wanted to ask about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Sorry. I mean, okay, so sort of, I guess Buddhism was a big influence for my writing in this play, and especially in the Pema character, but I did want to play with this idea that more of like the questioning side of Buddhism, and also more of the side where like you really are exploring the situation you're in at the moment. And I think that with the particular place, the end of the world, I mean, there are people that grow up there, but I think that for a lot of people that come there, it really throws them off and it brings into questions a lot of things in their life that they might not have questioned before.
It forces that questioning.
Yeah, I think the place does too, and really the place was a huge impetus for, like, that was it wasn't so much like the characters' stories, but just this idea of like what would a geographical end of the world be like that started this play.
That's really interesting because that makes it more about world building and more like building a game, board. And then you let the characters, it sounds like in your process, you were thinking like, I'm going to construct this game board and then let the characters play and see what happens.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting, which is, of course, I'm sort of extrapolating from the game, from the board game that is in the middle of the play. I also just wanted to note the fact that we are both huge sci-fi fans. And that, right? And then, there's something about being a sci-fi fan today, and also with climate change, and of course, like ever since the first nuclear bomb was dropped, the whole human race has been living with the idea that the end of the world could be imminent. We don't know, like the doomsday card, like in the board game and the play, can always be played. And especially as a sci-fi fan, we are constantly subjecting ourselves to fantasies of apocalypse just all the time. Every time we go to the movies. So in other words, every time we are doing the thing that we love, which is immersing ourselves in a radically different universe with laws that defy all known laws, we are also subjecting ourselves to the end of the world. And this was such an interesting exploration, I think, of just how we are living today, just as mass media consumers, and also anyone that knows anything about climate change or nuclear war or Ebola or just like anything that's happening in this world. It's like we're constantly sort of playing the game of the end of the world mentally. Did you feel like you were commenting on, sort of the time? I know the end of the world in your play is spatial, but it's also temporal, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I am. I think in one way, the whole idea of the end of the world and when it actually happens in my play, when I initially wrote it, I was really more commenting on the fact that death can happen very quickly.
Yeah.
Like it was just supposed to be really quick, and there are a lot of things that the characters don't get to say that they've wanted to say, that we might have questions about, that we don't get that resolved. But as I was continuing to work on it, I know and I realized that also just this idea of like the apocalypse and post-apocalypse is really a huge theme in popular culture, in the media that we consume. And what would it be like to be in a literal end of the world? Well, maybe they would they would commercialize on that, and they would constantly think about, and that would be a constant theme, just kind of how I think it is kind of right now.
It is kind of right now, yeah. That the commercialization of Ray's cart and just everything that her family represents, sort of like they're like the little Hollywood inside this like tourist destination or something. Like we're selling you apocalypse. Okay, let's have some questions from you guys. I could go on and on forever, and maybe I will. But let's see who else has some questions. Yes, you.
I was really curious why I felt like there was this really strong theme about like family and being close with people and forming relationships throughout the play. But a lot of family was missing. Like I was wondering where Carlos' parents were.
Yeah.
Like, a dying 9-year-old in this island he'd never been at before.
Yeah.
Like, nobody's really supervising him.
Yeah.
And also like the other siblings, I was curious why they were left out.
So first off, I do think family is a big theme, but I wanted to have like this central family, which is like the Ray, Demi, mom, and then the brothers family. But I also wanted to kind of think about the relationships that we form that aren't like strictly blood familial. So that's really one of the reasons why Carlos and Pema came, and I didn't want such a sense of Carlos's parents because I personally feel like he's a little bit detached from his parents. But if he wasn't, maybe they'd be in there. And then as for the brothers, like I wanted to give this sense of a big family, but in a more practical sense, I do keep casting limits in mind when I write a little bit. And but I wanted to try and give a sense of a big family without actually having to bring everyone on. And I mean, I love Tristan, Quan, and Herb, but it's not necessarily their story, so I don't think, like I was really focusing on Ray and Demi and the mother for that family.
There's another question. Yeah.
I was wondering, how do you actually figure out how to construct the end of the world game?
Oh, yeah. Well, if any of you have played the board game Pandemic, that's what it's based on. That's really what it's based on. But what I wanted it to be a cooperative game. So I looked at board games. I like playing board games. I like tabletop games. So I was looking at the ones that were cooperative and kind of just like the mechanics of them and how they work. And I think that if End of the World was an actual game, it would be kind of like Pandemic, but on like steroids. Like there would be way more cards, and perhaps like way more places to move on the board or something like that.
Just that game alone made me want to see this staged fully, you know? I mean, this isn't a critique at all, but like, I mean, our session isn't about like the strong parts and the weak parts or whatever,
Yeah.
but like the game is definitely a highlight, right? Like all the energy ramps up and all the characters are almost like, and we all are different as players than we are as people, so they all become a little bit different. Like, I was kind of surprised at how Demi is so different as a gamer than he is, like, as a super responsible, like, eldest son, you know?
But when Demi does something,
He does it all the
He
way.
really does it.
He does it all the way, yeah. I wanted to just, let's have more questions. Yes.
The whale story.
Yeah.
Is that an allegory about her pushing people away, or what was your purpose of putting that in?
Yeah, the whale story. It wasn't I wouldn't necessarily call it an allegory, but it was a kind of a moment where I wanted to create this memory that Ray has where she was like, where it was really physically engaging, and where, because like I sometimes feel like personal experience, from when I think that things are really beautiful, sometimes it's really wrapped up in a lot of complicated emotion. And I wanted to give a sense of something that would be physically and mentally tiring. And somehow I came up with pushing a giant whale. But I mean, I also wanted it to deal with the beach and something going out into the water. And so that was really more for a feeling and more of to create a moment of sort of complicated or hopefully complex beauty in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Did you think it was an allegory? And
It could be.
That's why I phrased the question.
It could also be
because
that.
I couldn't make sense of why it was there otherwise. Being answered, because it was okay.
yeah.
I mean, it's also like Ray's she's not going to give a standard answer, and I kind of didn't want that to happen.
Yeah. I do think that, I mean, many people have relationships with animals on an everyday basis, like, you know, with their pets and stuff. And I have never really had pets, but I've had these encounters with wild creatures. I especially love the desert, and I remember once encountering a desert fox who just like stared into my eyes for many minutes. I mean, I don't know exactly how long it was, but it felt like it could have been 20 minutes that we were just looking at each other. And I feel like there is something that happens when you commune with another species that is hard to describe, but kind of life-changing. And I also liked that she said, I pushed the whale and it moved. And there's this idea that maybe she felt the tide around her feet. You know, maybe she didn't really push the whale. I mean, maybe the whale felt the tide coming back in and was able to roll into the tide, but she was there at the moment that this miracle seemingly happened, and she feels like she had a part in it or something. I liked that.
You can decide that.
I like that ambiguity. I thought that was interesting, and in a play full of kind of unbelievable things. Like that was actually one of the more believable things, I guess. Okay. Yeah. Okay, Takeo, and then we'll go this way. Yeah.
I have a comment and a question that aren't really related to each other. So the comment I was thinking was, read it before and then watching it again. I was sort of thinking that it's possible to do almost like an Afrocentric reading of this piece.
Okay.
Because,
Go for it.
for example, like I know, right? But the comic, for example, right? There's sort of dismemberment and trying to it's very much evocative of the Osiris myth. That was really
Yeah.
It's based on an actual comic.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Which may be based on the Osiris.
Which could very well be. Yes, go on.
And then also even just like the sort of notion of the end of the world as in the sort of regenerative kind of, or maybe not regenerative kind of way, but I felt that there was something interesting regenerative about the end of the world. Was also sort of a bit of like rescue the earth a little bit. To a certain degree. So that was just something that was just sort of occurring while watching it.
Thank you.
The question that I had was sort of in relationship to the stranger. So I'm just trying to figure out what is sort of being theorized about the relationship of amnesia to apocalypse. Right? Why is this, like, what is that relationship, I suppose, for you in this way?
Sorry, no, I mean, I've gotten asked this question before. But I'm not 100% sure of how to answer it, but I will try. For me, I think that in a way I was playing with a trope, and I have two tropes going on, right? This amnesia trope and the end of the world apocalypse trope. But what I really wanted to do, and like, by the way, I actually dislike amnesia tropes in stories, and sometimes when I dislike a trope, I try to write one and try to play with it. I'm serious. So with the amnesia one, I kind of wanted to bring someone in who has like this place is so formative of so many things, right? So the people who live there, it really influences who they are, and I wanted someone to come in who was really not informed by a place. And the way I could think of that was through amnesia, but also to really think about what does that mean if you really can't remember anything about yourself, and to try to explore that. But I'm not entirely sure about its relationship to the apocalypse. I'm really sorry.
It's so interesting, though. Like, I feel like there's this real synergy between those two.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, there were so many questions over here somewhere. Yeah, you, and yeah.
So one thing I was really impressed by, and this also has to do with the staging of it, was this sense that by seeing all the other characters present in their humanness at every moment of the play, I have this powerful sense of the way their lives interlocked in a perhaps in an overly neat but beautiful way. And this came up before, but I'm curious about in the writing process, the way in which the arc of the story, which is anything but neat, and it's messy in the way fiction and life is messy. And then the structure of the characters, in a way, are balanced in a way that I presume I know designing a game, but I presume the process of designing a game is one about making the different elements of it come into balance so that the gameplay can be both fun but not too hard, etc. So I'm curious, in the writing process, how much are you thinking or invested in this quality of balance, or there being no excess in any way, and how much is in the rawness or the liveness of the story as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I am, I guess, with just making the play as a whole structurally feel balanced in some fashion when I write, I am concerned about that, but I think the hard part sometimes comes in when I'm writing dialogue, and because I like to try to write how I think people would respond, even if it's kind of fantastical. Like, I'm not going to say something that if I feel it would normally get questioned, like the characters are going to question it. So sometimes I can just write, and I'm like writing really long conversations, but part of me feels like that is what would happen. And then the other part is like the playwright part, or the structural playwright part, who comes in and says, like, this needs to get cut or this needs to go in order for the whole thing to feel like it has some sort of rhythm. So I don't know if that answers your question, or if okay.
It's in the revision process that you do that?
I think so, because when I tend to write the first time, I tend to write a lot. And then actually in the revision process, a lot of times what I do is I go through the play and I think, like, what's missing? And then I go and I write those scenes, but sometimes they don't get put in. I just like write them, and maybe I'll find out more about the character and maybe I can then tweak what's in the play in another revision process to do it. Yeah.
And there was another, yeah.
First of all, I really like games, so I was super excited to see the board game and the RPG in the play. And I thought that there are moments of escapism were really interesting. How, like Carlos with the video game says that, oh, this tank character isn't like real life. Like you shouldn't be like balancing him out with dexterity and stuff. Or in the board game, how all of the characters play these different roles in perhaps a way that they wouldn't normally act in real life. So I was wondering how that sort of theme of escaping from reality maybe connects even to Demi and his talk with Emma about escaping and how he escaped from problems. Maybe like if that was an idea that you had, or just how the game sort of functioned in that escapism of play.
Yeah, and I definitely did think about escapism a lot too. Of course, the thing with the board game is that it's supposed to be, they say it's not real life, but it kind of was supposed to show things about the characters and how they were and how a person, like how they play, right? So there's the part when Ray says, but if I do this, I'm gonna die. And Carlos said, or no, when Ray's gonna die, that's right. And Carlos comes in and says, I'm gonna use this card. And then they say, but so that could be bad for you. That's supposed to show something about Carlos, this character, right? And that actually this End of the World board game, one of the things that got cut out of the play was I wrote a history of it, of like how this board game came to be. And it was supposed to actually, number one, be a commercial item that they sell overseas. But number two, be like a safety exercise or a training exercise for children to kind of think about what are you gonna do when the end of the world happens in this really weird way. So when Carlos says about the video game, it's a video game, it's not like life. In one way, I think that's true, because when you play an RPG, I always want to be like, oh, I'm going to balance this character out, but really the effective way to play the game is just to max the stats that character's good at. But really when he says it, it's supposed to be a, wait, no, it's actually, then the board game comes in, and the board game's supposed to be a little bit more like life. Yeah. In a way, I don't know.
I mean, that's interesting you talked about like preparing children, because in the playing of the board game, when they're talking about the Doomsday card, Pema says it's supposed to help you prepare for what's coming, and then somebody says, but you can't do that.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so, you know, you can't prepare. You can't prepare for what's coming, is sort of the lesson of the preparation game.
Right.
Okay, I just want to get out, I want you to all think about the ending, all right? Because I want to hear from you guys what the ending means. But so I'm just going to ask one question, and then I'm going to ask you guys to account for the ending. My question before that is, but I just want to note, there is so much multiplicity in this play. There's the multiplicity of the games, different kinds of games, different kinds of media, period, because there's like movies playing, you know, every night at midnight. There's a monster movie playing in the local theater. There's computers, but not TV, and not cell phones, weirdly. And then there's, you know, just all these different cultures. Even in the board game, the monsters are from different countries. And then, you know, Ray speaks all these languages and has never been anywhere. The stranger has been to all those places and now is speaking a language that's not his first language, English. And and the candy is from all over the world that the mother has to collect so that people at the end of the world can feel at home. I mean, there's just so much about the whole world sort of converging at the end of the world and being brought in purposefully. And then also the end of the world people like Ray kind of extending themselves out to just trying to know the world through books and languages. You are super multi in everything that you do. You're super hybrid. And so like maybe it's just that, like you're expressing, you know, the way you see reality, but I just wanted to see if you had any comment on that.
About the hybridity?
Yeah, just
the
about
multiplicity
like
factor?
what's the multiplicity about?
I mean, there's a lot of multiplicity, and for each one of those things, I have a thought.
Okay.
But like, I feel like, I mean, it is in a way a reflection of my life, I think. And at the time that I was writing it, I was living in Japan. And so like things like language was a very big theme in my life, and studying language, and now I'm trying to study more languages. So that, but also it's a tourist destination, and like it's not one that's dominated by a particular country. So I was kind of trying to think about how they would deal with that, right? But as for the media part, I also think that like, you know, sometimes people don't like to put like pop culture references in their work, but we talk about it. Like this is something that I feel like is just in myself and it's in other people, and it just gets dropped and referenced throughout our lives and conversations. So I didn't necessarily want it to be like a big internet culture place, because I do think that like those places exist, but that there is media around, and just keep bringing it up. Things, for example, like media, but the other themes that keep coming up in the play is meant to like the characters are thinking about it, but they're talking about it over and over and over again. I think I kind of wanted that repetition.
Yeah, well, that dexterity line that comes up and that alternation between real reality and game reality, I think, is just, you know, gets at the truth of some of the life stuff that's happening. So even when it's escapism, sometimes it also penetrates right to the truth of that we always need to be dexterous, that we always need to be flexible. It's not about just strength and vitality, and that's what actually Carlos secretly plays. Too.
Yeah.
He secretly plays the dexterity, even though he kind of says he'll play the strength. All right, lights go down at the end. Lights go down on the mother. The lights go down on Demi. The lights go down on our new couple, and then they come up on two characters, and one of the characters says, "Wow, so what did you think would happen there?" Yes.
So this actually isn't kind of like, this is a thought that I just had kind of, and because I was thinking about the end of the world as something that like no one survives, and so I didn't really think about, and so it kind of confused me, like Pema and Carlos surviving, and I thought maybe they'd die later. But that's like how I was thinking, and then I was thinking about like this end of the world as like a survivable thing, like, you know, because they're talking about being safe or going places that are safe, and you know, trying, you know, what are you going to do at the end of the world? And so my question is, if it is something that you can survive, then why do Ray and the stranger go somewhere where they know they'll go quickly? Like, is that sort of like an acceptance or like a resignation to death? Like,
Well, they're already there, though.
yeah.
It's pretty quick. I mean, like the last few scenes seem simultaneous, although they're sequential to us. But
Yeah, I mean, actually, the question of survivability, because we have a lot of post-apocalyptic media, and I did want to think about, is someone going to survive? How does that happen? Do they survive? Because I think you could interpret it a different way. But as for Ray and the stranger, it is supposed to be quick. So like they are on the beach, and it's the only place they can go is in a cave.
yes.
I think it's interesting that you actually like killed off Ray and the stranger, because in most post-apocalyptic media, usually the main characters survive, you know, and you kind of, in the back of your mind, you're just like, oh no, they're gonna make it, and it's really interesting that you decided not to kind of go for that trope. You were just like, no, like in reality, they're on the beach, they're probably not gonna make it, that kind of thing. I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, but also because their journey completes in a way, because Ray's journey of this like being wanting to go and wanting to stay and wanting to push him away and wanting to keep him close, she at least is able to resolve that by the end, even though their plans don't get to reach fruition. But I actually, did nobody think afterlife? I guess, was I the only person that, okay, yeah, like, so there's like, I just want to hear more readings of the end or something, yeah.
My reading is that life is not controllable.
Yeah.
You just have to let go. And the theme of let go, to me, was the strongest. So there is no way to predict who is going to survive.
Thank you.
Yeah, yes.
I guess in the very end, it's that in the face of like massively horrific things are occurring, this is often there is no emotion or nothing to say or do beyond just take it all in, just wow, if that's what manifests itself. So it's kind of this, like a quick, or almost like a slow down after all this quickness that has happened, and just like the lone image, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and it could be a split second that we see. It's only a single word and a really short monosyllable, so we don't really know how it fits in with the end either. It could be like the moment before, the moment after, or yeah, I like that. Okay, Josh.
I'm not sure I have a reading on exactly what happened. I think what's interesting from a structural point of view is that you have a play, a scripted play that has no kind of flexibility in terms of what's going to end up happening. The end of the world is going to occur every time this play is performed at the end. Whereas the kind of meta-theatrical role-playing, play within the play moments, which I think is really interesting and I think very fresh take on that trope with having RPG and role-playing games and board games and stuff in the play. There is that chance that you could win, that you could beat the end of the world somehow. You could escape because of your planning, because of your teamwork. And it seems like we don't know if they won that game of end of the world that they played. It seems like it's possible that they did. So one that's just interesting kind of disjuncture between a play that has an inevitable ending and the world is sort of inevitable in this world, and the prospect that you could play the game well and escape from it. And also that maybe those characters are the ones who won, that maybe they won the game, and they're sitting there at the end of the game having watched everyone else.
I did like what you said about the team of Let Go. Pema and Carlos are a team of sorts, you know, and they do seem to be, between them, experimenting with a kind of Buddhist, you know, approach where Carlos is the apprentice learning it from the master. And it is interesting to think about Pema's note that it's just a continuity. There is no death. It's just continuous. So there is no end. That's Pema's actual belief. And so, for that team, there isn't an end. I mean, it's Pema's, you know, philosophy is born through whatever sense we make of this. Okay, were there more end readings? Yes, you. Yes.
I like the idea, I like the idea of scope and perspective in the play. And like the end of the world, even in the beginning, wasn't just a time or like a post-apocalyptic or apocalyptic occurrence. It was also a place. And the end of the world could be anything for a certain person. For Carlos, it could be cancer. For Ray and the stranger, it's the earthquake. But if you think about it from like a relative perspective, the end of the world is happening every day and happening in different situations.
Yeah. And let's have one more person that hasn't said anything yet. I feel like there was at least one other person that had.
Eli, did you want to say
Yeah. Oh, wait. Oh, sorry. Do you want to? Okay. Yes.
Yeah, so I liked, it was almost a self-referential moment when, you know, wow, you know, that the performance of, you know, the end of the world. So they were at the same time actors and spectators. But I also felt the sense of transcendence. That I felt that it was, you know, we were preparing for it all along. When, you know, Emma was talking about detachment, it's not quite working, but in a way it is working. And so I just felt really, you know, with the characters and they're not, Pema in particular doesn't really talk about history, she's in the moment. So yeah, I just felt moved by the ending.
Yeah, for sure. And beginner's mind too. I mean, Carlos is filled with wonder, you know. For him it's a beginning. It's really interesting in that moment. Did you have something?
Yeah, I thought one thing that it is really fascinating, the obsession of modern media with the apocalypse, absolute destruction. And one thing, maybe this is just me, but I was really getting into the characters and the relationships and things like that. And I stopped thinking about the end of the world as a thing that would happen. And I was just thinking about it as a place that they were at. And by doing that, when it actually does happen, there's something very sad
Yeah, I think your comments tied together pretty well, that there's so many ends of the world in everybody's life, and then there's obviously there are bigger ones. There are bigger ends of bigger worlds and smaller ones, private ones. So yeah, that ending really opens itself to so many interpretations. I think this is a fabulous Q&A. Thank you so
very
much
much.
for coming.